You can choose your language by clicking on the globe icon and selecting Korean or English. Ladies and gentlemen in Korea and in the United States, welcome to this very special webinar as we honor the 75th anniversary of the heroic actions of Medal of Honor recipient Colonel Joseph Rodriguez with his son, Major General Retired Charles Rodriguez. The Korea Defense Veterans Association is honored to bring you this program. I am Colonel Retired Steve Lee, and it is my privilege to moderate today's discussion. Today's program will include welcoming remarks from General Retired Abe Abrams, KDVA Chairman and President, a special conversation with General Rodriguez, who will share personal reflections about his father. Then we will open the floor for Q&A or comments with our audience members. You can write questions or comments at any time using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. You can do this even before the Q&A session starts. Please keep the questions and comments short and relevant to our discussion. This webinar will be available on the kdva.vet, V-E-T, digital library and the KDVA YouTube channel in 1 to 2 days. Now, ladies and gentlemen, former commander of the United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and U.S. Forces Korea, General Abe Abrams. Sir.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, everyone, and good morning to our friends in Korea who are logged in, and welcome to this special webinar to recognize the heroic story of Colonel Rodriguez, for whom Rodriguez ranged his name. We'll learn more about that later, and I want to thank his son, Major General Retired Chuck Rodriguez, for being on and really sharing. I know he's going to share some great personal stories, and we very much appreciate that. The Korea Defense Veterans Association, as all of you know, its purpose is to support all those who have served in Korea, not just the Korean War, but all of us who have served in Korea. And we all agree, all 61,000 of us who are our current membership, that's our membership level, that that's a special place to serve. And part of our responsibility is to recognize those who came before us. We often talk about how the alliance came about through the blood and sacrifice on the battlefields of Korea. And tonight we actually get to hear the story of behind the awarding of a Congressional Medal of Honor. Very few of those from the Korean War, and we're lucky enough to hear it. But I want to recognize all those who have served, not just in the Korean War, but all over 3.1 million those veterans who have served in Korea. We're in our ninth year of the Korea Defense Veterans Association. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to build upon the legacy that was handed to us from others. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Steve for a great program. General Rodriguez, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, sir, very much. So now I would like to introduce Major General Retired Rodriguez. Tonight is particularly meaningful, not only because we are commemorating a Medal of Honor recipient, but because we are all hearing from a son who knew the man behind the medal. History book tells us that then PFC Joseph C. Rodriguez displayed extraordinary heroism during the Korean War, charging enemy positions under intense fire, inspiring his fellow soldiers, and ultimately earning the nation's highest award for valor. His citation reads, Sergeant Rodriguez, an assistant squad leader of the 2nd Platoon, was participating in an attack against a fanatical hostile force occupying well-fortified positions on rugged commanding terrain. When his squad's advance was halted within 60 yards by a barrage of automatic weapons and small arms fire from 5 emplacements directly to the front and right and left flanks, together with grenades which the enemy rolled down the hill toward the advancing troops. Fully aware of the odds against him, Sergeant Rodriguez leaped to his feet, dashed 60 yards up the fire-swept slope, and after lobbing grenades into the first foxhole with deadly accuracy, ran around the left flank, silenced an automatic weapon with 2 grenades, and continued his whirlwind assault to the top of the peak, wiping out two more foxholes and then reaching the right flank. He tossed grenades into the remaining emplacement, destroying the gun and annihilating its crew. Sergeant Rodriguez's intrepid actions exacted a toll of 15 enemy dead, and a result of his incredible display of valor, the defense of the opposition was broken and the enemy routed and the strategic strongpoint secured. His unflinching courage under fire and inspiring devotion to duty reflect the highest credit on himself and uphold the honored traditions of the military service. And tonight we go beyond the battlefield. We explore the father, the mentor, and the man whose legacy lives on through family, values, and the quiet moments not captured in official citations or books. So please let me introduce Major General Charles Rodriguez, who was the Adjutant General of the state of Texas. He began his military service in 1975 when he graduated from West Point. During 33 years of uniformed service, he served on active duty for 8 years with the 101st Airborne Air Assault Division and 1st Armored Division in tactical communications. For 11 years, he served in the Army Reserve, including with the National Security Agency. His final 14 years in uniform in the Texas Army National Guard included command tours at the Signal Battalion, Training Regiment, and Homeland Defense Echelons. Sir, thank you for joining us. We will be honored to hear your opening remarks.
Thank you, Colonel Lee. Appreciate your invitation, and I'm honored to join you on this program. And I'm grateful for the stellar leadership that General Abrams provides for the Korean Defense Veterans Association and for his gracious introductory remarks. My father, I will call him Dad, was a role model for many people. To my younger brother and sister, he and Mom were the heart of our family and our safe place. Because Dad was a career active duty military officer, a constant for our family was following him as he was detailed from one military assignment to another. On average, we moved every 2.5 years when he was deployed on accompanied tours, like during his tours in South Korea in 1965, 66, and to Vietnam in 68, 69. My siblings, Mom, and I lived for 1 year at a time in Southern California near Mom's parents, my maternal grandparents, along with many cousins and uncles and aunts. Dad's commissioned officer assignments were in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, both with traditional troops, traditional with troop assignments, and in military diplomatic roles overseas. He served and our family lived in Panama, Bolivia, Argentina. His duties included a detail with the U.S. Army Security Agency in Virginia, company command at Fort Hood, and tactical advisory assignments with engineers from Latin American armies. His final assignments as a colonel included post engineer at Fort Bliss, Texas, and chief of the Inter-American Geodetic Service, IAGS, which was an early precursor of what is today the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Dad was born in San Bernardino, California in 1928. It was 25 years later that I was born as his first son in the same San Bernardino hospital. Dad's nuclear family was large. He and his older sisters and closest aged younger brother lost their mother, Victoria, before Dad was 5 years old. His father, my paternal grandfather, remarried and had several more children. Dad was raised for much of his early life by his older sister, my tia, Aunt Josie. Dad's growing up years took place in humble circumstances. Shortly after he earned his associate's college degree in architectural drafting from San Bernardino Valley College, Dad started his military career as an enlisted soldier. He was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1950 and was trained as an infantry soldier in Camp Carson, Colorado. When he was shipped to Korea that winter, it was early in 1951. The military had just ended racial discrimination by President Truman's 1948 Executive Order number 9981. As a new private, Dad met his fellow soldiers when the Korean War was well underway. Minority troops, Blacks, Latinos, and others, by then were assigned to integrated units, such as Dad's Company F, 17th Infantry Regiment in the 7th Infantry Division. So this brings us up right now to the heroic actions that you just mentioned from Dad. And when you read on 21 May 1951, which is exactly here in the States, exactly 75 years ago today.
Okay, sir. Great. Thank you very much. So as you mentioned, let's go to talking about an earlier understanding. So growing up, when did you first realize the significance of your father's actions in Korea? How did he explain or not explain his Medal of Honor to you?
Yeah, my first awareness about Dad's service in the Korean War was as a young boy. Probably I was 8 years old, 1962. Dad was on a company tour, that is, with family with him, stationed in La Paz, Bolivia. I remember he had invited to our house some of the people he worked with at the military mission to the Bolivian army and from the U.S. Embassy. I was pretty proud. I was showing one of his teammates the view from our front window. I pointed out the house across the avenida, the street, which was a circular mini mansion, explaining that I had just learned that the president of Bolivia lived there in Calacoto. So I thought I knew something. Dad's work friend was kind, and he said, "Oh, really? Is that so?" And then he asked me to sit down on the couch, and he pointedly but very kindly said, "I want you to know something. Your dad's a hero, and you need to always respect him." Well, I said, "I love my dad." And then he explained in a simple way what my dad did in 1951 in Korea and how his actions saved the lives of his infantry squad. There's not a lot of detail, but I got enough of the information. Yet I did not fully understand those details. And but I was getting a sense that Dad was highly respected. It was clear I was always going to listen to him and do what he said. And something about being a national hero, to me, that was a vague concept. I didn't really grasp it. But I remember that conversation. About 4 years later, when Dad had settled us as a family in California near my grandparents, he took me aside, showed me some paperback books he had placed on the bookshelf, pulled one out. I had just started seventh grade. The book he pulled out was the play, one of the plays written by Shakespeare. And he asked me to do something important while he was going to be deployed for his unaccompanied tour of 1 year in South Korea. He said, books, you got to read them, even if you don't understand everything inside of them. He told me to study when I'm at school, to learn, and not just at school. He said, never stop learning. Then he explained that he would be serving in South Korea and said it was more modern today, there in the mid-1960s, than it was when he was a private 14 years previously. So in a very general way, he summarized some of those experiences, the personal ones, the brutal cold winters, the hot onion soup, which he swore he'd never eat onions ever again in his life, but that was what they had for some of those days. That was the one warm thing they had with some bread. He said war is awful, terrible in every way, but sometimes necessary. Said that when he was a private, he did very hard things, but they were important to do. And he told me he was going back to South Korea to help make sure that war did not start up there again. So when he deployed to Korea, I asked my mom what Dad meant by hard things. And so it was then that I first remember, because I was not a reader, she handed me a copy of the Congressional Medal of Honor citation that commends Dad, the one that you just read. Then I understood why he asked me to read and to learn. It was after reading that citation when I seriously first thought about national military things and heroes. And I realized my daddy, is one of them.
Okay.
When I was a young boy, Dad never recounted the harsh and brutal stories of war, but he said clearly, we all must be strong and help others. We must do the right thing, even when it's extremely hard to do.
Okay. Well, great, sir. So, if you don't mind, could we just dive a little bit deeper into the man behind the medal? So, what was your father like at home, away from the battlefield, and how would you describe him as a father?
A local reporter asked me this same question in 2005 after a memorial service for Dad in Fort Bliss, Texas. Who was my father?
Mm,
So I say that Dad was firm and caring in equal measures.
mm,
His upbringing without his real mother and his uniformed service as one of the very few Hispanic commissioned officers in the U.S. Army at the time
mm,
had been very challenging for him.
mm,
These experiences truly toughened him and required him to first respect himself. Dad would tell school children and troops he spoke to after he retired that you cannot help other people until you first come to respect yourself.
mm,
He said, this is not arrogance. It's not self-love in some kind of soapy way. I remember him saying to the kids, before other things, you have to love yourself.
mm,
When you have a clear sense that you are worthy of respect because you work and because you are valued by others, then you become able to love others. So Dad was tough, standing his ground, not to build himself up, but to be present and to be ready to help others. Especially with the family, he was caring. Dad did what so many kind fathers do. As young kids, he romped around with us as toddlers, horsed around with us when we were young boys, especially when Mom wasn't looking. Um, and as a young man, I recall Dad took me to a machine gun range to experience firing an M250 caliber machine gun downrange at targets. He said, I'm doing this so you can respect the weapon, the lethality of the weapon,
mm,
and also respect the soldiers who shoot the gun.
mm,
This was instructional, and it reminded me, taught me really, um, that the equipment of war must be used with extreme care because such weaponry kills and maims and changes multitudes of lives. Practice, he would tell me that if you come to the time when are going to be behind this gun, practice so you know how to use it.
mm,
But use these equipment of war, only because there is no other solution.
mm, mm,
Preserving lives is a precious obligation, and employing weaponry in war is an unfortunate expectation placed on soldiers. It's why soldiers are soldiers.
mm,
So respect it, and even more respect the people and the fellow soldiers you're with. He was tough, and he was ultimately, though, very humane.
mm,
He described it this way, that the right thing to do is sometimes the hardest thing to do. And as a father, he would laugh with us, encourage us on days when we felt, well, not first class, not there. We felt gloomy. And he loved Mom,
mm,
my mom. He loved her to the moon. He'd say, the
mm.
best thing, he told us this because we asked him, who do you love more? And he would say, let me tell you, the best thing I can do for you, my kids, is to love my wife more than I love myself.
Mm.
So I don't know. I guess that put us in third, fourth, or fifth place, but that was okay. He was my central role model as a young man.
Okay. Well, good. So, talking about being a role model, so in terms of leadership and values, so what were the most important life lessons he taught you, other than being second, third, or fourth in his priorities? And did his wartime experiences shape how he raised you?
Yeah, some life lessons. Two come to mind. One had to do with honest work, and the other is how you think about yourself. On the first one, honest work, Dad's father, my paternal grandfather, fed his family by running a grapevine pruning and yard work small business. In the 1950s, every workday, he would load up 3 or 4 workers in his modest truck with gardening tools. And every day, my grandpa got his hands dirty, cut, scraped, bit up by ants, spiders. He came home at the end of the day exhausted. His whole team did genuine manual labor to earn their daily pay. And Grandpa held his head proudly. I saw him during a few Sunday afternoon visits when we went to visit his house. I remember he would be sipping a cold beer on some Sunday afternoons there talking with my dad. Grandpa's life was hard. Work was very scarce sometimes, but his modest income was enough to raise his large family, and he was proud that he was able to do that. My dad would say his father insisted that a man's job is to work and provide for his family. Stand up for yourself, keep your family sheltered and fed. Be a man, Grandpa would say. Yeah, even to me. I was a young guy, 10-year-old, and he would just say, be a man. Grandpa would pass away later that year in 1964. Dad's reminder to me was that people who work honestly, especially with their hands, deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Yes. So his first lesson, doing honest work, you deserve to be treated fairly. On that second lesson, which was more about how you think of yourself, growing up, especially during high school, I was invited by Dad to accompany him to his office, sometimes to the field, to see him interact with his foreign military counterparts, kind of like take your son to the office, but we were out in the fields. He was the lead engineer officer advising from the U.S. Army several Latin American Army engineer projects. For example, in Argentina, I was a rising, just about to enter high school senior during the summer of 1970. And Dad took me to an Argentine Army engineer training site where Dad provided technical advice, in this particular case, for horizontal construction engineer projects undertaken by the Argentine Army. That included work like building small creek crossings at weapons training ranges. So the second lesson about thinking about yourself, during a mid-afternoon break in training, about 6 Argentine junior commissioned officers gathered under a tree and sipped cold bottled Coca-Colas and were laughing, while not too far away, 24 of their troops were under separate trees, sharing a few canteen cups to drink from a 5-gallon water jug. I'm standing next to Dad, and as he's the advisor, and he just says, "What's wrong with this picture?" And I hesitated. He knew I didn't know what to say. So he said, first, the officers should either be drinking water from a canteen cup and not cold Cokes, or they should have planned for cold soda for every one of those troopers during the break. And then Dad paused again and he said, what else? What else is wrong with that picture? I shook my head. I didn't know. Second, he continued, some of those commissioned officers should walk over to the troops to at least ask a few of them, how you doing? And not to fraternize, but to check if someone might feel ill or confused about what they were learning, what they were training on. Dad continued, the point is there's no superior people and no inferior people, just people fulfilling separate roles. Now that lesson was one he said he learned as an enlisted man. When he was a private, he said too many commissioned officers at the time looked down with disdain on the troops, especially the minority troops who were now integrated into the U.S. Army. But he said, in the foxhole, when you're under fire, there's only one kind of soldier, and that other soldier is your battle buddy. To the other part of the question, did the wartime experiences shape how he raised me? I think yes. My brother and I were Dad's troopers. We got labeled, and his daughter, my sister, my kid sister, she was the princess of the house. Dad gently pushed us as boys. He pushed us to study because our job, he told us, was, hey, study is your job. He said, oh, by the way, the yard needs cutting and all the trash needs taken out. And well, here are a few other things you got to take care of around the house. These are your chores. But Dad wanted us boys to commit to jobs and then finish those jobs. Sweat as much as the job requires. Keep your complaining and belly aching to yourself, he would tell us, and be kind to others, even if you're all sweaty. Just be kind. So Dad was firm. He was not a disciplinarian. Certainly, he set standards and expected us to deliver to those standards. No shortcuts, get it done, no half-done work. But when the job was done, he'd say, now you're on your time, make it count. At first, my brother and I used to think that meant go out and have fun. But he actually meant us to rest a little bit, clean up, and then get back to study and homework and prepare ourselves because college was our future. So Dad was caring. Yes, he was always mission driven.
Okay, so let's go a little bit more into untold stories. I know you told us some, but so are there stories or moments about your father that are not in history books but have stayed with you? And from that, what do you wish more people understood about him?
Yes, a lighthearted memory I have. Dad was home for a short R&R, rest and relaxation. It was near the halfway point of his Vietnam tour. We were living in California. Dad and Mom came to a theatrical play hosted by the high school. That play was called The Fantastics. I was in 10th grade and in drama class, and I was cast as a comical character. The traveling actor whose specialty is to die very dramatically. When the cue came, I launched into a 45-second arrow in the proverbial heart dying scene. And of course, that requires gasping and flailing about and falling to the ground and then recovering and then doing it again. And then one more time. I had a great audience. They loved to see that. Finally, with no more dramatic juice in me, I rolled down the 4 concrete steps from that mini stage that we had in our mini theater. And I stopped dead cold at my parents' feet. They were seated in the front row. Just quiet, quiet. Everyone was thinking I was going to pop up and die again. But then Dad leaned over and in equal parts sincerity and in jest, asked loud enough for the full audience to hear, "Are you okay, mijo? Son?" Boy, he had real comic timing. That was spontaneous. I wish more people would have known that my dad was regularly lighthearted and grateful for life. An expression both Dad and my mom would say is used often in the Hispanic culture, si Dios quiere. That roughly translates to, well, what I hope for and I just said out loud will come to pass, but only if it is in God's will, only if it is in part of his divine design. Dad and Mom took the extra time to include social time with others, those he worked with, neighbors, extended family, fellow Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. When I was a young boy, I recall more than a few nights when Dad and Mom hosted a small group of 2 or 4 couples to our house. My little sister had been dutifully put to bed early, and my brother and I had been bathed and dressed very nicely. And at the appropriate time, we were trotted out to shake the hands of the guests, saying, "Pleasure to see you," and then trotted back to our shared room. Then for 3 or 4 hours, we would hear the low frequency notes from the stereo playing records as background music while they together played bridge or just talked about whatever for a long time, it seemed, but usually we fell asleep pretty quickly. Some of their socializing was part of expectations that came from his military job. Most of it was because Mom and Dad really enjoyed the company of others. And at some larger gatherings, they would dance, and Mom loved to dance with Dad. When I was in high school and visiting home from West Point, I would sometimes be brought along to spend an hour or so at a formal event they attended. They'd go down, they'd call me down. I'd spend an hour and then they'd send me back to the room. Some of these were the dinners of the Congressional Medal of Honor Society, where I did meet several recipients and their wives, and including some of my counterparts, the kids of the CMH recipients. And at many of these more formal socials, there'd be time for dancing, And mom would, after she'd dance with dad for a while, she'd take a break and then she'd grab me by the hand and get me on the dance floor. Didn't want to go, but she said, no, you're going to learn a few steps and listen to the music. That's all. Put it together. And then about the time I started, feeling like I knew what I was doing, dad would dramatically but lightheartedly cut in
Hmm.
to bounce me away from mom. And that was a small little spectacle, but it brought a hearty laugh from the other guests, the fellow recipients. And so I really enjoyed dad enjoying himself. Both my parents loved being alive together and spending time together and with others.
Oh, that's just wonderful to hear. And thank you for sharing and opening up about your family and especially your father. We're doing this webinar today because it is the 75th anniversary. And so there's a perspective about that. So, as we mark the 75 years since his Medal of Honor actions, what does this milestone mean to you and your family? And, how should future generations remember your father and his fellow Korean War veterans?
Well, an anniversary is always a time to stop and reflect and try to get something from that reflection. Dad would say the whole experience of being at war, whether that's in the battlefield or supporting those under fire, they're both honorable roles, is unspeakable. But that, for all of them, it's unimaginably stressful. He told me war's ravages are unbearable, especially for families who are harmed, especially when that war comes to a family's doorstep. He said there is nothing glorious about warfighting. It's a grim reality that soldiers are called to do. You never know when you'll be called to possibly pay the ultimate price, putting your life forward at high risk as part of the military mission. He'd add that while war is truly hellish, serving in the military is honorable and it is the heart of deterrence. If an army is capable and strong and ready, and the soldiers are capable and strong and ready, adversaries will stand down or wait until another day to act violently. Dad would say that sometimes warfare is unavoidable. The cost of war is real. He'd tell me it truly comes back to many warfighters, sometimes in physical injury, loss of limb, other harmed parts of the body, PTSD, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, moral wounds. In Korea, Dad suffered with a dislocated finger he bore with the rest of his life. That was the small thing we saw. But his Korean War injuries were considerable after Moon-Yi-Ri. Considerable grenade fragmentation wounds. He had to be evacuated to the U.S. Army Hospital in Japan. He was patched up pretty good. He learned some Japanese. His airborne training resulted in compressed discs in his backbone that kind of plagued him for the rest of his life. In 1964, he was thrown out of a Jeep. He was the ops officer in an engineer unit in Fort Hood, Texas. He fell hard, put him into a concussion. Thankfully, after a day or two, he fully recovered. His heart irregularities, for which he took vascular medications during his later years, turned out to be the result of his military service. During his Vietnam War deployment, 67, 68, his Army Engineer Unit one of their missions was to spread toxic herbicides on the vegetation on South Vietnamese paved roads and near airfields. So this chemical clearing provided open fields of fire and pushed back fast-growing and encroaching vegetation. So this whole activity prevented enemy assaults and convoy attacks by the Viet Cong. But we found out after Dad passed away from lab work that he had submitted to a military hospital that in his blood, the effects of herbicides and toxic sprays that he and his team spread in Vietnam were very malign and harmed him, causing his in later years, his last 10 years, he had arrhythmia, he had aggravated irregular heart conditions and pain, a lot of medications. Anyway, the sum of all that heart problem took his life 3 weeks before his 77th birthday. So yes, Dad described war's costs. Some were physical, some were psychic and emotional. He suffered from a few of them, but he lived a full life, a life of gratitude and joy as much as it was possible. You know, it just caused me to reflect that we're approaching Memorial Day here, and we really owe gratitude and reverence to those who have served and who's no longer with us and what they did. And we ought to remember and honor their sacrifice. It took guts and fortitude to do what they did in any war, or even in the intervening during the Cold War. It was a different kind of thing, but it was also gutsy. And standing in the breach with a battle buddy means you're standing there as the tripwire or to be between the enemy and whatever needs to be protected, whoever needs to be protected. So we salute those in services. I heard at lunch today a reading of a poem written by Admiral William McRaven in his new book published just last month, Duty, Honor, Country, and Life. It's called The Crosses, and it's a powerful Memorial Day tribute. So I couldn't find it on the web. I think it's still pretty well protected by the copyright, but pretty soon you'll probably find it. It's called The Crosses. And as we approach Memorial Day, Admiral McRaven's poem is powerful. Time takes its toll on all of us. Gravity brings us closer back to the earth every year. And but memory persists if we celebrate the great good of those who came before us. In the Latino tradition, there's a day in the year called Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. And it takes place on 1st of November, the day after Hallows Eve, Halloween. And in our tradition, candles are lit, caricatures of skeletons and death, but dressed up in festive mood are displayed and paraded, not in parody, but to collectively remember those we loved, but who are no longer with us, that they're not forgotten. During Dia de los Muertos, families tell stories, happy stories about grandparents, parents, neighbors that had passed away, relatives, dear friends who made positive differences in our lives. We remember the time when, because we remember they continue to have a life with us and within us, and their lives mattered not just then, but still matter today. So especially on that day of remembrance, we celebrate a heritage of what they provided us with. It brings smiles to our face. It seems kind of macabre, but it brings smiles to our face. And remember their care of us helped tangibly and emotionally encourage us in small and powerful ways. A note, when Dad died on 1 November 2005, nearly 27 years ago, he died on Dia de los Muertos. So we remember, and today we smile.
Well, good, sir. Well, thank you for that. So before we get to our final question about legacy, I would just encourage, if you have audience members, if you have a question for General Rodriguez or a comment on this special day, please do so using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Okay. So for this final question to you, sir, so in what ways has your father's example influenced your own military career and leadership?
I'd say that my journey to and through the U.S. Military Academy included some seasons of doubt, questions to myself, should I be there? Do I want to be commissioned? Do I want to be like Dad? These were normal reflections of anybody. My classmates helped me through my doubts, and I helped them. And yet, even during those sad seasons, I was inspired by Dad's mantra and his phone calls to just finish the job you started. So one foot in front of the other, one march formation at a time, one academic test after another, and then service. 33 years in uniform seemed to pass pretty quickly. My wife, Cappy, is also a military retiree. She's retired as a major, adjutant general corps, and we both wore the uniform while we raised our children. Vital to our journey's success was the support we provided each other, and especially the achingly adaptable resilience of our children, who sometimes were latchkey kids on some days. when we both had military duty. The more days I served in uniform, the less I doubted and realized that we're here to help others, firefighters, troops, NCOs, commissioned officers, their families, and the survivors. Dad would say that military service comes down to living and having each other's backs, being there to accomplish a vital mission, but not alone, with others. We're called to resolutely finish the good work we start and to help others to be encouraged. We owe it to battle buddies. We each have a unique calling. We have to help each other get to our unique calling. So he would say, stand firm, care mightily for others. And he always reminded me to keep learning. So that would help others in small ways. Apply it, affirm them, affirm their lives. We stand here to boost one another when there are seasons of needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So thank you, sir. So ladies and gentlemen, again, if you have any questions or comments, we welcome you to please use the Q&A tab and do so. So let's see here. Okay. All right. Here's one. So you mentioned your father had some sayings for you. So were there any other favorite sayings or philosophy that your father had?
There's one in particular that would never go away. It never died. And it usually came just before I was off to do something. I was off for a weekend somewhere or off after visiting back to the real world as an adult. And what he would say very quietly, and he would just say, Gary, that was my middle name. That's how he used to call me. Gary, remember to watch your six. And I've had to explain that to my wife a few times because she never was familiar with that. But just like a clock, six is the lowest or the back end. And that means something could be going on back there. And so just know that while everyone may say they're in your corner, they may not be. So just watch it. And as you move forward, some of the detractors you think are the worst are not in front of you. Some of them are behind you. And that was just the reality of having learned many, many of those kind of lessons the hard way.
Okay. Let's see. So another one is, did your father have a hobby or a pastime that he especially enjoyed? And did he explain why he valued these so much?
Right. I think it sprang from his love of being with other people. He took he was extremely honored to be able to be invited to speak to school kids and to young soldiers. He'd be sometimes hosted across the country. He would speak to them and just give them words of encouragement and answer questions they might have. But the one that kind of comes to mind is the hobby that just never went away, and he took us the boys with him whenever he could. It was golf, GOLF. And golf was his secret passion. He and Mom would go golfing. Mom found out that it's better to go with him every so often than to be a true golf widow, which is to say he's always gone, and so you're here at home. And she became as good a golfer as him from the women's tee, but she kept the ball on the fairway almost every hit. And so after a while, he would say, no, 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 you don't need to come today. But he loved golf and he loved the camaraderie of his golfing buddies. As a point of interest, on the day he died, the 1st of November, he went out for a morning golf game with his buddies. They had a group that would go together once a week or every other week or sometimes twice a week. And he had just come back. It was a beautiful day in November in El Paso. He was on top of the world. He had just placed a call to the insurance company and was talking to the agent. Mom was prepping lunch for him. We were doing other things in other parts of the world, but it turns out that heart condition just grabbed him and just flatlined him. And so he fell to the floor, and we trust, because it happens when you just pass out and then you don't come back, that it was painless, and we're so grateful for that. kind of landed half on the bed, and mom was kind of frantic. And just then the doorbell rang, and they had previously set up an appointment with the insurance and investment guy. And he came in, and mom rushed him to the back and said, what do I do? And anyway, it was too late by then. Got him to the hospital, but it was too late. And while that was tragic for us personally and hard on mom because she was right there taking it all, we know it happened quickly. But all that to say, at the funeral home, we had a viewing, and all his golf buddies were there. And they came up to me as I was kind of mostly standing near the casket, and they were very polite. And then on the side, they would each tell me what happened that morning of when he died, and it was powerful, and it was rich, and it was like, they each expressed that Dad was such a good friend to them. And then I realized really profoundly, these guys aren't just saying it. They had real stories, and then, a year or two later, one would die, and a year or two later, another would die. So it was about that time for that crew. But it was, being with others and spending time and enjoying life. It's vital. And Dad, very fortunately, was able to do some of that for many years.
Okay. Great, sir. So we really appreciate audience participation at KDVA. I'm just going to read a couple of comments, and then I'll go to a question. So one of our audience members said, "I'm sure your dad must have been very proud of you, his son, and your military service." Another member said, "Sir, I just want to thank you for your yes to keep the legacy alive, not only honoring the remembrance of the past of your heroic dad, but also bringing its light forward into the present so it will never be forgotten. His legacy shines through you. Thank you for your service and continued support to the Alliance."
Thank you.
And now let me go to a question, sir. So there are only 63 Medal of Honor recipients alive today, and it is such a rarity that Americans get to enjoy fellowship with these amazing patriots. Could you share some of your experiences when you got to spend time with these very same Medal of Honor recipients? And lastly, did your father know Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavides, and did you ever meet him? I know you talked a little bit about your father having fellowship with other Medal of Honor recipients, but are there any other experiences that you remember?
Well, let me speak to Sergeant Roy Benavides. Yeah, yes, Dad was a good friend. There was kind of uh, 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 a group of living recipients back when he was alive. It was a small gaggle, but a significant gaggle of Latinos, of Hispanics,
Mhm.
and they would, just kind of like be in the neighborhood together. And then they would go and circulate with everybody else. But they would make it a point to stay in touch. And Roy was one of those. Master Sergeant Benavides was a bright heart and a solid leader. I did not meet him extensively. He was one who I shook hands with, and I didn't have a lot of interaction with him. But when he passed away, and he was buried at Fort Sam National Cemetery here at in Texas, in San Antonio. Um, Dad stopped what he was doing. He was on another trip, and he just got airline tickets, and he flew here, and he just said, "I need a room, and because I've got to rest, and then tomorrow morning I got to get out there for the service and the burial." And so he was very close to all of them, especially to the Latinos who were recipients, but to all of them. Other people who I remember, and I'm because names sometimes slip me. There was a dear friend who was a Marine recipient, a little younger than Dad, but he made a point to come to Dad's final mass in San Bernardino and burial. I was the adjutant general at the time, was able to prevail on my counterpart, the adjutant general of California to bring a firing detail, because it was very difficult at the time because of money to get an active duty team there. But it was great because the CMH recipient, our Marine, Dad's Marine friend, sat next to Mom at the time, and was a great help and a great support. Um, um, and oh, by the way, Dad was buried in Mountain View Cemetery, and isn't it something that is right across the street from where he was born? The hospital's right across the
Mm,
street.
mm, mm.
So it's kind of like a life fully lived. And and
Right.
and there was another retired general, General Brady, and he's in this area. He's in Bernie. And when I was in a previous job here in San Antonio, I asked him, hey, would he come and be part of a dedication ceremony? New building was going up, and we wanted to do a military tribute. And I barely fit into my uniform at the time. Uh, but he was there and he looked sharp, and he spoke at the event we had for the dedication, uh, retelling stories, saying, "Yeah, I remember you, and you were just a snotty-nosed little kid," and that made me feel real good. But the affection is genuine, and it really is a camaraderie that was unique. They were all humble people. They were all, they would be the kind of people who would say, I don't wear this medal for me. I wear it for the guys that could
Mm,
never be here. I wear it for the ones that were never recognized, that many did much better and more gallant than I did. And I was really touched by the uniform humility of the recipients. They're just solid people, and they want to give back in small ways as they can, tell their story, and give their message. And each one has a slightly different message.
okay. Well, great, sir. We also, before I go to my closing, one other audience member was asking, how would I find a copy of the poem that you referenced, and would it be appropriate for a Memorial Day ceremony? I know that you said that it is very appropriate for a Memorial Day ceremony, and the book by Admiral McRaven is out, so people can get that. They just probably just got to Google it.
Yeah, absolutely. I looked it up just before here just to see, am I saying it right? The name of the book is called Duty, Honor, Country, and Life,
Yeah.
a tribute to the American spirit.
Yeah.
And the poem is The Crosses. And I had not heard it before someone read it today. And I just commend it. It's available. Let me see who the publisher is. I can't really see that. It's already a New York Times bestseller.
Right.
And it's available on Amazon or any number of places. Um, so I sometimes words come together and beautifully convey uh, reverence and hope at the same time. It's very hard to see that, but that poem did it.
Okay. Well, sir, and audience members, thank you very much. This has truly been a special event. And so tonight, we did more than remember a honor of medal recipient. You know, we came to know a father, a leader, and a man whose courage continues to echo across generations. And through Major General Rodriguez's reflections, personal reflections, we were given something rare and invaluable, a glimpse into the personal legacy behind one of the Korean War's greatest acts of heroism. So, as we mark the 75th anniversary, we are reminded that the legacy of Korean War veterans lives not only in monuments and medals, but in families, values, and enduring spirit of service. And KDVA is honored to play a role in honoring our veterans. Our mission brings together people of all generations who cherish the alliance between Korea and the United States. And as we move forward, KDVA remains committed to advancing the Rodriguez family's legacy. And here's a brief look at what we've accomplished and what lies ahead. So this in May, we went over 61,000 members and 139,000 social media followers. And so these are great milestones thanks to the Korea U.S. Alliance Foundation, or KUSEF, our fundraiser. and our members who build our association. We are about to open new KDVA chapters in Rhode Island, Idaho, Nevada, and Washington State, and more KDVA campus clubs in Korea and the United States. And with the sponsorship of the Korean Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, MPVA, we will be conducting our fifth Korea Revisit program in mid September. And then on the 9th and 10th of October, we hope to see you at the annual KDVA reunion in Washington, D.C. It's free. Please consider joining KDVA because everything that we do is free. And although it is free, our membership is priceless. So again, details for everything is available at the kdva.vet, VET website. And so again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And let's remember our veterans and fallen during Memorial Day here coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.